Longtime watchers may know that I have a bit of a rocky relationship when it comes to crowdfunded grinders. There's the good, the bad, and everything else in between. And today we're looking at the new Gevi GrindMaster to see where it lands on that very same spectrum. In a lot of ways, at least on paper, it feels like more of what's been coming out over the past few years. It's a single dosing, low retention, RPM adjustable, 64mm flat burr grinder. But it does seem to have some unique features. I mean, personally, I can't say I've tried any plasma anti-static technology before. So in today's video, we'll be going over the GrindMaster from top to bottom, covering its features, going over its performance, and of course, its downsides. And as usual, in the spirit of full disclosure, the folks at Gevi sent me the GrindMaster for my review, and they of course agreed to my terms of no access to my draft or video review prior to release publicly. So with all that out of the way, let's dive into it. At a glance, the GrindMaster definitely looks pretty different, but beyond its unique design, it does have all the features you'd expect from a grinder trying to compete in today's single dosing low retention market. Starting up top, you've got the dosing chute. Also, as you enter the chute, there's a built-in anti-popcorning lid that seems to be pretty effective, as I've never seen beans come out after they've gone in. And from there, the beans make their way into the grind chamber, which, as standard, comes set up with a pair of Gevi's versatile 64mm titanium obsidian-coated burrs. And the burrs themselves are adjusted by a step dial with 65 total settings that aim to give you grinds from fine to coarse, and are powered by a brushless 400-watt motor, which means it uses electronic switching to control the currents. And that matters because without brushes, you get a longer motor lifespan, more efficiency, and most importantly to us light roast fans, more starting torque. The motor also gives you RPM control, which does seem to be the current grinder meta, but you won't hear me complain about it. And the Gevi GrindMaster gives you a nice wide range between 500 and 1500 RPM. And as the grinds leave the chute, they're also passing through the plasma anti-static device I mentioned earlier that's attached on the underside of the grinder in this small box. And those grinds are then dosed into one of two dosing cups. They have just a standard dosing cup, and they have one with a flush magnetic detachable scale, both of which have a top with a variety of portafilter diameters, 51, 54, and 58mm. The dosing cups, along with most of the body and its included accessories, are made of metal, other than the scale, the RPM knob, and the front-facing adjustment dial. And finally, they've also designed the GrindMaster to have tool-free maintenance, which allows for quick and easy access to clean the burrs and grind chamber. So with the breakdown of its features out of the way, let's get into the meat of this review and talk about how it functions day to day. And the first piece of the grinder to make contact with the coffee is the burrs, so that seems like a good place to start. As I mentioned, the standard 64mm burrs are Gevi's versatile set, which are made of steel with a titanium and obsidian coating, which gives them their dark grayish black color, and according to Gevi, a longer lifespan as well as reduced friction. The burrs themselves have a pretty standard bimodal blade geometry, and produce a nice grind size uniformity and a clean, clump-free texture, but in part that could be due to the anti-static unit it passes by on its way out of the chamber. Though I'm sure many folks will likely spec out their grinder with one of the offered SSP options, but I do think it's important to emphasize that the standard burrs are perfectly capable, and seem to be a quality set for those looking to utilize its all-around capability. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you have control from 500 to 1500 RPM, which gives you access to another variable that can manipulate the grind consistency. Also, on the topic of RPM adjustments, I'm happy to report that I've had no stalls or jams on lighter roasts, even on cold starts. So the motor seems to be working as intended, and according to Gevi, in the event of a jam, the motor will go in reverse for a couple of seconds before re-engaging forward in an effort to break free and continue grinding, but I'll be more than happy if I never experience that. Also, the dosing cup and scale combo is a nice feature, as it lets you weigh your dose either before or while grinding, and it can be removed and used outside of the grinder for any of your weighing needs. And finally, the main event, let's talk brewing. The espresso is balanced and complex, and of course, as I mentioned, you can eke out some additional clarity on lower RPMs, so it's a solid option regardless of your espresso style or roast. And the filter coffee falls into the same flavor category as the espresso, i.e. balanced and complex, but it does occupy a much larger area on the dial, which when paired with the RPM control, gives the end user more options and a bit more room to play when dialing in your ideal brew. So if the performance and usability section is the meat of a review, what does that make the quirks and downsides? Is this a dessert? I don't know. But either way, let's get into them. As I mentioned earlier, the grind adjustments are stepped, and even though each step doesn't feel excessive in its size, it will hold you back from those really fine adjustments you'll get from a stepless grinder. This really left me wanting more out of the espresso range, which is a relatively small, maybe 5 to 8 steps, depending on your coffee and your dose. And this factor as well would make me think twice about buying this as an espresso-focused grinder. Also, through my time testing the grinder, the retention numbers are somewhat inconsistent. The results don't really seem to have any rhyme or reason. Sometimes I'll get 0.1 grams, and other times I'll get up to a half a gram or more, all on the same settings. And when it comes to the plasma anti-static, it does seem to help at the shoot, but inside the chamber, it appears to be a bit of a different story. Grinds seem to sit not only on the blades of the burrs, which is relatively expected, but back behind the static burr in the chamber, as well as in front of and around the spinning burr in places you wouldn't really expect. And this was a bit more than I anticipated because of its vertical chamber, its plasma thing, and its zero or near zero promotional materials. And also I found it to be surprisingly loud. Gevi promotes a pretty wide but also standard range between 55 and 75 decibels, but it's my understanding that these tests are usually done a few meters away, which isn't realistic in terms of using it. So based on where most people will stand while grinding coffee, the numbers I caught are definitely on the upper end of their range and beyond. And lastly, the main body of the grinder appears to have some slight flex to it, as it doesn't seem to be directly attached to the main support pillar. So that does give me a little concern considering all the weight and movement that occurs at that end of the grinder. Beyond the fact that the Gevi GrindMaster looks like it would fit in more as part of a motorcycle engine than a coffee grinder, it does have quite a bit to offer. Generally, it does perform as expected and advertised, its motor is robust, it's capable of brewing for all methods, and it produces tasty, well-extracted cups of coffee. And really, in the grand scheme, I feel like the quirks and downsides are relatively minor and don't really strike me as deal breakers. Honestly, if there's one thing that I think would scare most folks away, or at least some folks, is just the nature of crowdfunding. I mean, it really is a bit of a gamble, but this isn't Gevi's first product, so I'd say the risk of backing is minimal but never zero. And when it comes to pricing, at the time of filming this, the campaign wasn't live, so I don't have those exact numbers, but according to Gevi, it will be in a similar range as the Time War Sculptor, which I'd speculate means somewhere around $300 to $400. And on that note, I think it's time I start wrapping this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. What are your thoughts on the Gevi GrindMaster and its pretty out there looks and design? And also, what's your comfort level with crowdfunding coffee gear? Drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications of new videos posted every Friday. Check out my Instagram @Sprometheus for content throughout the week. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for exclusive access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Ponyboy